So next we have Gary Johannes, who is an experienced psychotherapist and hypnotherapist. Gary owns and runs Mental Health in the Workplace, a clinical health service provider and training company covering the whole of the UK. Gary is also an authorised mental health first aid trainer and a speaker on men's mental health awareness. And that's what he's speaking about today. So Gary's going to explain to us what mental health really is and how to spot the signs of poor mental health in yourself and those close to you. Not only that, he's going to give us a series of recommendations that we can use in our own life to improve our overall health and well-being. Over to Gary.
Hello everyone. So what am I going to talk about today? Well, it's all about men's mental health, but I'm actually going to talk about mental health more generally, and also try and give you a little bit of content from 2 million years of evolution of the human species and to understand how we got here. And I'm hoping to give some coping mechanisms which people can start using about their mental health and how to look after themselves rather than relying on other people. It starts with ourselves. And Ian has made that clear earlier how that affects us. So I'm going to bring some of that stuff back in, but also hopefully bring some science into it as well without being too sciencey. So that's one of the main things I'm going to talk about. But I didn't know this until about 15 minutes ago. I actually want to talk about something else, which I haven't ever spoke about directly. And that's about me and my journey to this point. I haven't got any big mental health stories, but I've actually got a continuum of a story. So I grew up in South London, and I'd say I was quite privileged. Other people would say that I came from a very underprivileged background, you know, where one of 9 children living in very basic circumstances. And the reason I want to tell you this story and go forward is because I'm a mental health trainer. I run 7 schools, and I'm going to go on back to that for people who want to become therapists and look at the therapy market, but I also want to look at it from a men's perspective. And I left school at about 13 and 14. We couldn't afford to put a uniform on my back as a family. And then at 16, I joined the Air Force because it was the easiest way to move forward. And I just went on. And the culture I came from was men were men, and we had to be men, and we could show no vulnerability. To be soft, be kind, be nice was weakness. And if you were like that, you'd be eaten alive. So you wore this skin of, I'll just take everything, I'll do everything. And I went through all the normal aspects of life, and I ended up, probably about 20 years ago now, running nightclubs and bars, owning bars and restaurants, and particularly nightclubs. And I had to have the persona that I took no shit. And excuse me for swearing, but it was what I had to be. But the real me was never that. But I had to be this because I was the bloke, and I had to wear this. And probably until I was about 45, even though I'd run very successful businesses, had multiple outlets, I was never myself. As all my life. And then things turned around in the industry, so I left the industry, and I happened to start working with some people, and they said, why don't you do this? And I'm like, I got no education. I can't do anything. Even though I was in a massive role where I had a team of 900, I never felt good enough. So I had to wear this exterior of toughness. And I'm not tough at all. But I had to wear it. And most people saw me as somebody you just didn't mess around with. Except I was probably the most gracious person you could meet if you knew me, but nobody was ever allowed to know me. So I then went on and thought I need to look at myself. So I looked at coaching, and that was okay, but it didn't fit it. And I ended up training as a therapist and a hypnotherapist at that. As you can see, I'm not very fluffy. So I learned a lot about neuroscience. Even though I've got no education. I've now got a diploma in neuroscience, I've got the highest level qualifications as a therapist and all this. And I didn't start until I was 45. But the thing I really want to bring to the point today is men's mental health from the industry out. Because everybody's talking about us, how we need to look after ourselves, and that's what I'm going to talk about. But actually, it occurred to me, listening to Ian, listening to other people, the industry is not very good at looking after men. even though they want to. So I've got 7 schools I teach up and down the country. So I've got students from Southeast England up to Newcastle, and there's 25 other schools. And over the last 5 years, I've taught hundreds of students. I've graduated 4 schools in the last month. And I think there's probably out of 4 schools, we've only graduated 4, 5, maybe 6 men. So the industry on average is about 70% women, I think. So that means when a guy who might come from a very rugged background, shall we say, he may be a builder, he may be an office worker, but he believes that men need to have this face, but they realise they need to get some help. When they look about getting help, it's always someone who's very feminine, because there's not many men, there's not many people like me out there where men can go, actually, one, I can go and see a man and it feels a bit more comfortable to take that first step. And 2, most of the men out there who are in our profession have got doctorates and they've got consultancies, or the professors, so they're high level of intelligence, so there's no relationship. People don't go, that's a normal bloke, I can talk to him. I hope that makes sense. We need, and I didn't realise it until listening today, that actually one of the things I bring to our profession is I come from a normal background. In fact, I come from a worse background. And one of the things that brought it home to me is last week, we've got somebody join us as a student in Newcastle, and he saw me doing a video and just talking about a little tiny bit. And he said, you come across like me, I'm a lorry driver. And when I heard you talk and just say some stuff about who you are, I thought, actually, I could do that. I didn't know whether he was having a go, saying, if you can do it, I can do it. But I think it was genuinely because he related to somebody on the same level as them. Quite often, if you go to the doctors or the hospital, you never feel like those people relate to you and who you are. And I think mental health, particularly men's mental health, needs people talking about this who people can relate to, not just who know stuff. Hopefully that makes some level of sense. And actually, we need more people who are just normal, in the terms of there's nothing special about them. They're not highly educated. They don't have this great vast knowledge. They don't come from Eton. We see what that does with our politicians. It makes them very different from us. I think mental health needs to be much more every day. So I'm a co-founder of Mental Health in a Workplace, and we go into organisations, and those organisations are really important to us because they've already decided it works. But as you'll see, I run 4 companies. I'm a senior lecturer, as I've said. I train people to do what I do all over the country. I'm a mental health first aid trainer, where organisations want to have more knowledge of how to help people in the workplace. But more importantly, we do solution-focused mental health training around awareness. And I'm a practitioner. I'm an everyday practitioner. I see people one-to-one every day. I'm a founder of Inspired to Change, where we get like-minded people working in this field one-to-one all over the country. So that gives you some understanding of what I do and why I do it. Somebody mentioned this earlier in the day, and that's 1 in 4 people in the UK are suffering with a mental health condition at any one time. Now, when I started talking about this has been banding around for about 10 years. And certainly 5 years ago, when I was doing talks and presentations, this used to shock people that so many people had mental health. Who knew? Now, nearly everybody knows this. And for us, that's quite good news, because that means the conversation about mental health is really starting to happen. People are more aware that people are suffering with mental health. And really important for us that we keep seeing this stat, which there are some arguments about whether it's more than that or if it's quite as bad as that, but this is a mean average, and this stat comes from Mind, the mental health charity. Now, the important thing that it's still out there is if you're working with a group of people or your family and friends, within 40 people, 10 of them will be suffering from some level of mental health issue. It might not be a condition, but at that moment, they may well be suffering. So all around us, we know there's people suffering. And the important thing is, if you've got someone around you who's suffering with mental health, it's not the person suffering alone. That will then permeate through so many of their people around them, whether that's colleagues, whether that's family, whoever. So that is really important. If you've got 1 in 4 people suffering, it will go further. It makes a big impact. So we've got to be aware of it, and we've got to start working with it. So my question always is, what is mental health? The definition of mental health is a person's condition with regards to their psychological and emotional well-being. And that comes from the WHO, which really do get these messages and understandings and definitions quite well. But you'll notice there's something absolutely missing from that slide. It doesn't say whether it's good or bad. Mental health has no definition of bad or good. It is a state, just like physical health is. So mental health is just where you are at any one time. It's not whether you've got good mental health or you've got bad mental health. It's what you are right now. And that's the definition. Health is a complete physical, mental, and social being, well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. So it's about where you are. And if you're in good state of health, it means this, and if you're in a bad state of health, it means that. And I'll go into more detail. Mental health is a state of psychological, emotional, and spiritual well-being that enables us to realize our potential. And that's really important. Mental health, if it's you're in a good place, you can realize your potential. If you've got mental health issues, you can't realize your potential. And that's how we identify it, is what can you become? Who are you being? And if you've got good mental health, you're being the best of you. And that's what good mental health is about. So let's look at a little bit more about good physical health and bad physical health. So, good physical health, when you see somebody walk in the door, you can tell whether they've got good health just visually, can't you? They may have strength, they may have flexibility, they may have endurance. You can see they're, able to do a day's work and feel good about it, or whatever they happen to be doing. They're not walking in limping or arm in a sling. They haven't got any injuries. You can see it. Absence of ailments. You know they're not coughing and sneezing or got some other ailment. Physical health, it's easy to spot. They've got good skin. They've got strong nails. They've got white teeth. They've got shiny hair. My business partner put this slide together, and I'm sure she put these 2 last bits on there just for me to be able to say in public, moderate body fat. So how easy is it to spot somebody is physically well? It's quite easy, isn't it? How do we spot somebody who's got mental health issues? Because if we talk about all the things around mental health, and particularly men's mental health, I've lost some people very close to me, and I hear about it on a daily basis, and it's something I'm very passionate about. I've done a lot of work around men's mental health and making it aware, but every story comes with the same little footnote. I did see him yesterday and he was fine. I was only talking to him yesterday and he was full of himself. He was so happy. I hope you'd agree that somebody who's suffering terribly with a mental health condition can look absolutely fine. They can smile, they can stand up straight, they can be looking okay. But actually beneath that image is the whole turmoil what goes with their mental health condition. So how do we know if someone's got good mental health? How do we spot it? Well, it's not what they look like, it's their ability to do things. So if you know them well, it's harder to spot somebody who you don't know well. And it's about what they normally do to what they're doing now. So somebody who's got good mental health will have the ability to learn new information and skills. And if all of a sudden that person's normally quite sharp and quite picks us up, it's struggling, then you'll go, okay, that's different. What's going on there? They'll retain and recall information. I work with a lot of teenagers just before their exams to get them ready for their exams. And they can't recall all this amazing stuff. And we know they're A-grade students, but all of a sudden, because of the stress and the pressure of exams, it's harder for them to recall information and retain the new stuff. But we've got this whole list. If you've got good mental health, you can feel and express emotions. You can form and sustain and even end relationships. Cope and deal with conflict. You can affect your own mood. Earlier we heard Ian talking about how you can take responsibility and start impacting your own mental health. But it's easier to do that when you're already in good mental health. I'm going to share with how you can do it when you're in bad mental health a bit later, and a lot of it is very, very similar to what Ian said. You can survive pain, disappointment and sadness. You can cope with uncertainty and adapt to change. And right now, in the middle of this pandemic, there were people who, to take a phrase from a book I've just reading, there were dandelions and orchids. So dandelions will adapt to whatever ground they find themselves in. But orchids, if it's not just what they expected and the right conditions, they'll fail. And if you've got good mental health, you're much easier to adapt. If you've already got bad mental health, things are a lot tougher to adapt to change. You can see the positive aspects in situations. You can see the best in things. And most importantly, what underpins all of that in good mental health, you can make a proper assessment of any given situation. And that's the key sign. Those are the key signs of good mental health. So that's what we want to be. And I hope that rings a bell with some of you. So, is it possible for us, any of us, to be in a positive mental state all of the time? We've just seen what it gives us. Is it possible to be like that all of the time? No. I'd go as far to say it's not very helpful, and it's not really good for us, because human beings, we're different to any other species. We have something that many other species don't have. We have needs and wants. So if you look at those needs and wants and those desires, we have belief systems. We have values. We have emotions. We have expectations, sensations, feelings. So can all of those be perfect all of the time? Can we be getting everything we want? Right now in this pandemic, this is the first time I've been out in public in 4 months. First time I've had proper shoes on in 4 months. It's quite a strange feeling. So actually we can't always be where we want to be. So it doesn't mean we have to be in perfect good mental health all the time. And we at Mental Health in the Workplace, we actually cite this quite often. And it's a Chinese symbol of yin and yang. Seemingly opposites are contrary forces, are complementary. They're interconnected and interdependent in the natural world. So what that really means is, it's daytime right now and it's summer. How do we know? It's because there's no snow and it's not dark. If we only ever had daylight and we only ever had the same temperature, we wouldn't know when something's different. Ian mentioned earlier about how do you feel, what's your temperature like? You wouldn't notice your temperature if you didn't have different temperatures in different places. So we have to have bad mental health to recognise good mental health. We have to have bad days to know how good a good day is. So it's not about staying in perfect mental health all of the time. And Richard mentioned earlier, it's okay to be not okay. It's not a problem. For us, it's about recognising when you're not okay, so you can then do something about it. But you can't be aiming for that perfection all of the time. It just doesn't work. And we shouldn't aim for it. We should understand where we are, so we can actually always be looking to be better, the best versions of ourselves. So what is mental health? And what is mental ill health? So mental ill health is a condition that affects a person's emotions, their thoughts and their behaviours in such a way that it disrupts their everyday ability to carry out everyday activities, including their work, including their relationships and their behaviours. So mental ill health is when you're being affected in your day-to-day life. And hopefully that those people who have ever suffered, which I would say everybody's had some level, will understand that some days we're just not as good. Sometimes we're really not good. The technical term for most mental health issues and conditions are called a neurosis disorder, and that's symptoms that are considered to be normal as a result of normal emotional experiences or reactions to your circumstances. So the conditions are based on if this is happening in your life and you're experiencing anxiety or depression or some of the other conditions I'm going to talk about, that's normal, because those conditions, those circumstances are putting you in a place where that's how you should react. So it's not, again, an awful thing. It's about understanding whether it's correct or normal and then moving forward. What might come up as a normal neurosis disorder, which is a normal response to circumstances around you, would be anxiety, depression, PTSD, self-harm, eating disorders, OCD. These are all considered normal reactions to what's happening in your life. It's not very helpful, it's not very nice, but they are normal to the way you're seeing the world and what's going on for you. Less common ones, which we barely would touch on even in our training, are symptoms that they're considered not to be as a result of normal emotional experiences and circumstances, and they will cover things like psychosis, personality disorders, and the bipolar, maybe the more severe levels of bipolar. So that gives you an idea of what that covers. So a little bit more stats. Mental health illness is rated by experts as being amongst the most disabling of illnesses. And recently, in the last few years, the Chief Medical Officer of England has, do you know what, I never knew who he was until we started seeing all these government things about talking about the pandemic, and he used to turn up at 10 Downing Street. Until then, it was just a name. But the Chief Medical Officer of the UK has had to work out physical illness compared to mental illness and rate them on a disability scaling, because it's now absolutely understood and comes under now law that a disability of mental illness is exactly the same as a physical illness. So every single mental illness has a corresponding physical illness it's ranked against to say how disabling it can be. But it's now seen mental health is amongst the worst disability you can have. Mental illness can be a major cause of long-term disability and ranks highly on the scale of disease of burden. And disease of burden is a combined effect of premature death and years lived with a disability caused by the illness. So we know that long-term mental illness is now one of the biggest causes of people's lives being shortened, not just by suicide, which is some of the things talked today, but just in general. And it can be such a strong disability. But that's not all of the time. That's for some people who suffer dreadfully with long-term mental health conditions. Some mental health issues have a dramatic impact by causing premature death. So yes, we can talk about the suicide, and we know that 10% of anybody with a personality disorder will take their own lives. But actually it's bigger than that, because people with depression, anxiety, those ranges of mental health which somebody may suffer all the time, it will lessen and lessen their purpose and their value in the world. And actually it can physically, Ian talked about the physical impact of mental health. We now know that one of the biggest causes of cardiac failure is actually mental health conditions. Biggest impact of obesity, or biggest cause of obesity, is mental health conditions. There are so many mind and body connections which mental health start and stimulate. Ian talked about inflammation. That all comes from the release of stress hormones, which cause inflammation and then cause all the other physical illnesses. So mental health is far more than just the way you think. But actually, it starts where you think. mental health issues often start in childhood. 75% of all mental health conditions start before the age of 18, even if you don't realise it, but it does. So it's important. Often, additional suffering is caused as a result of stigma. And that's what I was trying to talk about earlier when I was talking about myself. I wasn't able to be the best version of me because I was always worried about how I should fit into my community, to my expectations, what other people forced upon me, or I forced upon me because of what I thought I should be rather than what I was. So stigma isn't always open and in your face. It can be very underlying. It can be just community-based, just expectation-based. I had stigma because I didn't think I came from the right place. I didn't think I was clever enough. But I was wrong, I hope. People with long-term mental illness have the lowest employment rates of any disability group. So you can take any physical disability and you can measure it against mental illness disability, and people will employ people now. It's fantastic. We've moved on such a long way. Mental illness is still not. And I think in 2018, 300,000 people lost their jobs due to having a mental illness. It's quite staggering, isn't it? Many people who live with mental health live meaningful and satisfying lives. They really do. And they can contribute a massive amount of value to the lives of others. So mental health isn't a problem. It's the way we deal with it, the way we see it, the way we interact with it. And Ian's going to be talking at this event, will be talking about how we can do differently. But actually there are a number of organisations I work with in Peterborough who have actually started that. But for me, the conversation we've been having around mental health up until now, really, in my opinion, is we've had a conversation about having the conversation. And for me, this sort of event is where the conversation starts really happening about who can have that conversation. We've just talked about it. This is about doing it now. So mental health. Most people think if you've got mental health, you've got mental health, but actually it's a continuum. We don't stick in one place, we move. Nobody has to be labelled, and that label of you've got a mental health condition, which actually mental health just means who we are, but you've got a mental health illness. Some people get stuck with that label. Actually, mental health is flowing all of the time. We can have maximum well-being, we can have minimum well-being, we can be diagnosed, we can be undiagnosed. If you're diagnosed, you might be a person in good mental health, you've got no issues, you're being the best version of yourself, which is fantastic. We can all be there, and we've all been there. Sometimes though, something might happen in your life, like the pandemic, and a person, you won't get diagnosed, you don't need to, you just know you're not coping and you're struggling with poor mental health in that short period of time. Some people may stay in that place but never get diagnosed, so they're not being able to be the best version of themselves. You might be a person who's got a mental health condition, you've been diagnosed, so you know you've got a mental health condition, but you're not actually looking after yourself. You're not doing what you need to do to move out of that. You might be a person with a mental health condition, and it's a serious one, long-term one. However, you're looking after yourself, you're taking your medication, you've got all your coping mechanisms, you're doing the right thing. I know many chief executives, CEOs, business owners who've got proper long-term severe conditions, but they're doing amazing. They've got huge give within the community because they're doing the right thing and they're looking after themselves. It's not mean, having a mental health condition does not mean you have no value, you have no purpose. You can be fantastic. It's about looking after yourself and getting the right support. Every single body there is on this continuum, and we all move around it. You lose someone close to in your family, you're likely to drop into one of the negative areas. You then recover from that grief and you'll move up again. We can all move around. So all of us are on here, and we'll all be on here at different times in our lives, or somewhere on moving around here. So hopefully that makes sense, but this continuum is fantastic. I think this statement for me is one of the reasons I'm up here today, because I started working in the mental health profession It was something I enjoyed, but the more I worked in it, the more I saw stigma, the more I saw how hard it was for people to come out of that place of mental health. And particularly with men, it's harder because we're supposed to be something. We're no different. It is no different from men or women. It's just the way we are conditioned to understand it. If we can get rid of stigma, all the stigma what's surrounding our mental health, we can better support it and reduce it. And we can reduce mental health across the board for everyone, not just men, but everyone. To understand what mental health is, we've got to understand stress, because we can go right back to early man. I can take you back 2 million years and tell you what causes it and what happens in the brain and the neuroscience of it. But actually modern day, 2020, the biggest cause of mental illnesses is stress. Yes, we have people with chemical imbalances in the brain. Yes, we have people who suffer mental health conditions because of early years abuse. Fortunately, that's quite rare, but mental health isn't. Mental health illness isn't, I should say. Mental health we all have, but mental health illness isn't rare at all. There's loads of it going on. It's almost, the biggest cost to all of our medical industries, biggest cost to employers. So the biggest cause of it, we know, is stress. But what is stress? So stress is a result of an influx of certain chemicals into the brain and the body, like adrenaline and cortisol, that occurs when some action is required. And once again, it doesn't say whether stress is good or bad, does it? It just says stress is an influx of chemicals. So we know that stress isn't good or bad. So when is it good for us? Survival. So we get chased by a wild animal. We're in a football ground here. If we get chased by the away fans, so that stress might be really useful to us, okay? Because it triggers the fight or flight response, which is innate in us. It goes right back 2 million years, is how we survive. That stress puts us in a position where we can fight or flight for our lives and gives us the opportunity to survive. So it's useful. But actually adventure, now I don't know about any of you guys, I've jumped out of an aeroplane, I've gone canoeing in weird places like the Falkland Islands. It's adventure which stimulates stress, and it's good for us, because when we've got that positive stress and that release of chemicals in our brain, it releases just enough to enable us to do what we want to achieve. Performance. Any of you have to stand up and perform like this, or go to a job interview, or anything else where you've got to be, putting that best step forward, I might say, best foot forward. That stress you get for that enables you to actually do your best job, be at your best in that moment. But you only release enough stress to enable that to happen. Personal growth. Anybody wants to grow personally, the number one thing you have to do, step out of your comfort zone. And that instantly puts you in a stress state. But you release that stress to enable you to grow. Without that stress state, you can't grow, you can't become more, you can't learn more, you can't do all of those things you want to do in that personal growth. It enables that. So stress can be good. When's it a problem? So if that stress gives us all those good things, when can stress be bad? Well, the definition of bad stress is the feeling or state of mental or emotional strain or tension resulting from perceived, adverse or demanding circumstances, and the subsequent feeling of not being able to cope. And there's two really important bits in there. Perceived. You do not have to have a bad circumstances in reality. If you think it's bad, it will still be bad. It will still create that negative level of stress. And that point when you know that you're not in a good place is when you can't cope. And that's really important. So stress symptoms, we base it at mental health in the workplace. We look at 4 categories of stress symptoms. and you've got cognitive. So if your level of stress is too high, and this is where you differ from your norm. So again, Ian talked about homeostasis, and that's when we're at our optimum. When our stress is excessive, because stress caused by choice, where it's enforced on us, has no limit, and it forces loads of cortisol into our system. And when we've got too much, we lose cognitive ability. So some people will have much more cognitive loss than others. Inability to focus, difficult decision making, poor attention, errors, negative perspectives, forgetfulness, poor judgment, and many more. Some people will be more emotional. The way they respond to mental health conditions is more emotional, and they'll feel overwhelmed or powerless. They'll have anger without cause, obsessions, depression, sadness, any of these things. So some people will fit much more in that category. Physical. Now, this is really interesting. Going back to what has been said earlier, that very often our mental health triggers physical illness as well. And many people won't realise that what they're going to the doctors for to get treated with their physical condition will be a stress response, will be a mental health response. So the treatment for the physical condition isn't always effective. But that can include headaches, tiredness, sleeping difficulties. IBS is, if anybody's got IBS or knows people with IBS, it's directly linked to the release of chemicals in the brain, and that's why it's so hard to treat. Eczema, sweating, shakiness, muscle tension, all of these can be signs of overwhelming stress. And then we've got behavioural, psychological. So we might panic, we might self-harm, tearfulness, aggression, social withdrawal, fidgeting, changes, grinding teeth. So many, the way we behave can be so impacted. You may have something from all of these areas. You may really be more one than the other. Everybody's different. But if you start recognizing when you're good and when you're bad, you can start noticing. If you start looking at, okay, when I'm stressed, I do this, this and this, or I feel like this, you can start spotting it early, that as soon as you start doing those things, it will be a sign that you have too much stress. So you almost want to understand this so you can understand yourself. And we have, when we teach this in corporate enterprises and families, they actually start using this with in their assessments of their staff, or even families with their children, so they can start spotting when somebody becomes more overwhelmed. So it's a really great tool. So quickly dealing with stress, a couple of little things. We've got a program called Dose, and this is where you need to dose yourself up. So this is a nice little thing to actually understand how to, if you're suffering with any levels of mental health, how to actually change that and maybe get yourself back to that nice even kill, or start moving it, or keep there. So D in DOSE stands for dopamine, or we call it drive. It's a nice way to remember it. So dopamine release, we have a reward system in our brain, and we seek pleasure. It drives us to seek pleasure and achievement, those goals. Emotional responses you get with DOSE enables us to identify rewards that we might get, and then we're more likely to go after more. So it's about taking action to move towards them. So dopamine is one of our best things. Exercise is probably the easiest way of getting dopamine, and dopamine counteracts stress hormones, and we can store it up a little bit as well. So we get it when we get recognition or praise. Who here writes, who writes on a to-do list? Most people. How many people, when they've done something and something's not on their to-do list, writes it on a to-do list so they can cross it off? I do that. Every time I do that, I get a hit of dopamine. The brain doesn't know the difference between before and after. So actually, all those people who write things on their to-do list and straight away cross off are getting a hit of dopamine. That's why we do it. So doing anything, taking any action, particularly exercise and diet, will help. O stands for oxytocin in our DOSE model. We call it oneness. So it's the love hormone, the hug hormone, which is a little bit depleted at the moment, isn't it, that hug hormone? And it makes us feel connected or loved. It actually goes right back to tribal instincts and survival of the species, that the more people in our tribe, the more chance we've got surviving. So oxytocin is released when we bond with more people, and we feel safer, and it gives us the opportunity to survive. But in modern day, it's about connection. It regulates social interaction. It enables us to build and maintain healthy relationships. So it's really important. And when you see someone you haven't seen for a while, but even in social distance, when you're on Zoom with someone or you meet someone in a supermarket, you might have to be a distance, but I've met a lot of people I haven't seen for a while today, and it still made me feel good. I got a hit of oxytocin. When you're not getting it, weirdly, it creates isolating behavior, which you need to be out socializing, but when you're not getting enough, it actually makes you more introverted, which isn't helpful. It makes it worse. Loneliness is really important, and fear and distrust. Loneliness now is a really big impact, and it's a big thing for male mental health. Loneliness has now been shown to be physically damaging to the body. So physically damaging, it has the equivalence of smoking 15 cigarettes a day on your physical well-being, and on average will take 7 years of your life if you don't get enough oxytocin. But actually, it's twice as damaging to your body as obesity. So there's loads of stats coming on how loneliness, and therefore the lack of oxytocin, is damaging to your physical body. S is for serotonin, my favourite one. Serotonin, we all get it, we all need it. Actually, we know it creates stability. It regulates sleep, it regulates appetite, digestion, maintains mood balance and sociability. And we only have to smile and we get a hit of serotonin. You know, it's the happy hormone. We do anything nice, we talk to anyone nice, we achieve anything, we also get serotonin. It's brilliant. It regulates memory and learning and enables us to focus and retain more information. So to be the very best of ourselves, we talked earlier about how do we know if someone's got poor mental health. When you've got lots of serotonin, you actually work better, you are better, you can be more the best version of yourself. And it's easy to get, just doing nice things, noticing what's been nice, noticing. Somebody talked earlier about, Richard spoke earlier about going out last night and collecting glowworms, 250 of them. I don't know if I've ever seen one in the live, but I don't like, I'm a city boy, so I never know what it's like out in the wild. It scared me a bit. But he went out and collected them, and he said it was amazing. He felt so good. He got loads of serotonin, and it made him feel good. When we get plenty, we sleep better, we have a better diet. Our body tells us what we want rather than us looking and craving bad food, and we're better at self-care. We get that serotonin hit. When we don't get any, or we don't get enough, we get insomnia, irritability, pain is enhanced. If we suffer in any pain, it's harder to memory, and we're more likely and more susceptible to depression. So it's important. And endorphins, which is about 27 or so other neurotransmitters, it regulates emotional responses, enables us to cope with stress and anxiety, and be more adaptable. It regulates our psychological responses, enables us to cope with physical ailments and pain. Things like dopamine, serotonin, all those chemicals are actually our best pain relief. It's better than any pharmaceuticals you can get. We get it really easily. Exercise, laughter, chocolate, but not white chocolate or milk chocolate. It has to be good quality dark chocolate. Chilies, we get a release of endorphins when we eat chili. So if you like spicy food and you really like it, it's because of the endorphin hit you get. When we don't get enough endorphins, we get lethargy, pain, intolerance, anxiety, and physical disorders. So you can see why you should get them. And they're so easy to get, as I said. You just have to take any of these little actions. So powerful enhances your business success. So how to dose up? 3 positivities I'm going to give you now. First one's positive thought. Second one's positive action. Third one's positive interaction. Positive thoughts. We have 100,000 thoughts every day. And even if 50,000 of those were negative, and many of these thoughts are unconscious thoughts, you don't necessarily consciously recognize they happen, but even if 50,000 of them, which is half, were negative, that's a lot of negative thoughts. So we can consciously think about what we're thinking about, choose. We have choice over our thoughts, so we can start choosing what we want to think about. And if you start choosing those positive things, you will be far better at generating serotonin, dopamine, and oxytocin. Because thoughts become things. Absolutely fact. Thoughts become things. What you think about, you will bring about, whether that's good or bad. So positive thoughts, you have a positive thought, it will equal a positive feeling. And that will in turn create you to take a positive action. And those positive outcomes lead to that generation of positive chemicals, that dose of chemicals. And as Shakespeare said, there is nothing either good or bad, but thinking will make it so. Positive thoughts. I'd recommend you get a notebook and every day write down what's been good. Doesn't have to be big. I had a nice cup of coffee. I went for a walk with a dog. I saw some glowworms. Whatever might be nice. And if you can only do one, that's fine. If you can do 10, that's fine. But write down everything that's been good and do it every day. Positive action. For me, this is one of the most important ones because actions lead to positive outcomes and it's compounding. Every time you do a small good thing, like get up and make a cup of coffee or go for a walk or do some exercise, that little thing will definitely lead you to more because the reward system was always looking to create more of the same. Easy ways to get dopamine, do some exercise. Now, this isn't the exercise where you go down a gym and you're trying to run a marathon. This is doing anything. Any sort of activity will be enough. From where you are, from what you normally do, just do some activity. It will generate dopamine and make you feel better. Diet. It's really important that you get your diet right. Now, I'm not a dietitian, but what I do know about mental health, there are some foods which stimulate dopamine. And the whole of the food, the further away from process it is, the more your body will actually recognize it and take it on board, and it will be good for your mental health, not just your physical health. Keep pressing the wrong button. Sleep. Sleep is the #1 component for good mental health. They talk about nutrition, they talk about exercise, vital. But without sleep, the other two are not effective, not as effective. Sleep is the #1 pillar stone for good mental health. And you should be getting 7 hours of undisturbed sleep as a minimum. So if you're not sleeping well, it might be an indicator of your mental health needing to be improved, and you need to start doing some of the other things. Or if you're busy, the way you work or your life is allowing you, you need to change your environment so you can sleep better, because sleep is the #1 pillar stone. And relaxation. We all need relaxation, and I'm now ordering everybody to take time off. Your mental health has to be reliant on the way you behave, and taking time out has been proven one of the most effective ways to improve your mental health. Just relaxing, read a book, chat to a friend, do something nice, just take a nap. It's proven. A 20-minute nap in the afternoon will absolutely change the way your mental health is. So it's worth taking a bit of time out. If you've got a busy day, go for a walk. And if you can do it in the outside, particularly a nice greeny area, even better. Challenges. It's really important that you push your limits a bit. So do a challenge. It's really important. That will feed in loads of good stress. Nature. Ian talked about it. If you go out and do more nature-based things, going out in nature, the science has shown the release of chemicals into your brain and your body, just stimulated being in very green and nature-based places, will absolutely change the release of chemicals in your body and change the way you feel 100% of the time. Unless you're being chased by a bear, that might be different. Altruism, being kind, doing something for someone else without any level of expectation of anything in return. It's so important. We are designed to be able to give things to other people. It's about that oxytocin level. If we actually go out and do something for someone else, we automatically get a release of good feelings, good chemicals, which will change us. Which is really hard if you've got a mental health condition, because you can be very inwardly looking. But actually to step out of that and go, okay, I'm going to carry somebody shopping across the road. I'm going to, give somebody a lift. I'm just going to do something for someone because I can. Absolutely vital. And do anything. The reason I put anything isn't because I don't know what to say, it's because I don't know what you can do. All of you have got ability to take some action. So it's got to fit with you. It might not be the things on here, but do something, take action, start doing something differently today. The last one's interaction. Trouble at the moment with the way we're having to lock down, but a connection, what it means is a connection between people that result in survival and growth. That goes right back to the reason we survive as a species, because, we're not particularly tough as a species. There's not many other animals that couldn't take us in a fight. So we have to band together. So we have to connect. It's an actually innate thing. Just like we need shelter, just like we need food, we have to have connection. To socialize intentionally the best you can right now. So I'm not telling you to break any rules, but actually start socializing in some format, in some way. Smile consciously. When we smile, we release neuropeptides in our brain that release these lovely chemicals. So we just smile and consciously choose to smile. Be complimentary, which is hard for me to be nice to people. No, you be complimentary. Say something. If somebody says, oh, that's really good, or it's really nice, or, sometimes it can be more important. Say your partner says, oh, you look really good today. That can really mean a lot to us. It releases those chemicals. So be complimentary. Hug your partner. Now, this is within social distancing regulations. Hug people you're allowed to hug. Hug your kids and your pets. It's been absolutely proven. If you hug your cat or your dog or your llama, whatever you tend to have as a pet, you will release exactly the same amounts of serotonin as if you was hugging a loved one who was a person. So actually, those people with pets, absolutely really benefiting. So dose yourself up. The 3 principles of positivity. It's a powerful dose to enhance success. Thank you.